Tuesday morning at St. Helena Medical Center arrived with the subtlety of a fire alarm. Harsh, insistent, and impossible to ignore. Dr. Finn Ashwood stood outside Emma's room, coffee cup in hand, watching through the glass as she shifted restlessly in her sleep. 26 hours since the accident, and her brain activity had been steadily increasing. Dr. Wellington's optimism was looking less like wishful thinking and more like medical accuracy, which somehow made everything worse. "She's showing signs of emerging consciousness," Dr. Eleanor Cross said, appearing beside him with her own coffee and that unsettling ability to read his thoughts. "Dr. Wellington expects her to wake up within the next few hours." "I know." Finn's voice was flat. "I've been monitoring her charts every 20 minutes since midnight." "That's not healthy behavior, Finn." "Neither is smoking, drinking, or working 80-hour weeks, but somehow we all manage to function." Eleanor studied his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the dark circles under his eyes that seemed to have become a permanent feature, the way he held himself like a man bracing for impact. "When was the last time you went home?" "Home is overrated. My office couch has better conversation skills than most people." "That's not an answer." "Sure it is. It's just not the answer you wanted." Before Elena could respond, a commotion erupted from the ICU. Sarah Blaine's voice cut through the morning calm like a scalpel through skin. "We need Dr. Ashwood in room 314, stat." Finn was moving before Elena could blink, his body shifting into the focused efficiency that made him one of the best trauma surgeons on the West Coast. She followed, her psychologist's mind already cataloging the way crisis transformed him from brooding self-destruction into precise medical machinery. Room 314 housed a 50-year-old construction worker named Dave Martinez, who'd been admitted 2 days ago with what should have been routine complications from a workplace injury. Now he was thrashing against his restraints, his eyes wide with panic that went beyond normal post-surgical discomfort. "He's been like this for 20 minutes, Sarah reported, her usual sardonic demeanor replaced by professional concern. "Vitals are all over the place, and he keeps saying someone's trying to kill him." Finn moved to the bedside with practiced calm, his voice dropping into the soothing register he reserved for panicked patients. "Mr. Martinez, I'm Dr. Ashwood. You're safe. You're in the hospital." "No!" Dave's voice was raw with terror. "They put something in the IV. I can feel it burning. You have to help me." Eleanor stepped forward, her training kicking in. Paranoid delusions following surgery weren't uncommon, but the intensity of Dave's fear suggested something more complex. "Dave," she said gently, "I'm Dr. Cross. Can you tell me what year it is?" "It's..." Dave's eyes darted frantically around the room. 2025? No, wait. 1987? I was building the Morrison Tower downtown. Kevin Morrison's project. But that was years ago. Finn went very still. "What did you say?" "The Morrison project," Dave continued, his voice growing more agitated. "Kevin Morrison hired our crew, but then he disappeared. Just vanished one day. Left the whole project hanging. They said he lost his mind, couldn't handle the pressure." Elena caught the way Finn's hands had frozen on Dave's chart, the subtle but unmistakable tension in his shoulders. "Dr. Ashwood?" "I need to check his medication history," Finn said tightly. "Sarah, what pain management protocol are we using?" "Standard post-surgical package," Sarah replied, but her sharp eyes were studying Finn's face. "Finn, what's wrong?" "Nothing. Just run a tox screen. Make sure there are no contraindications." Eleanor watched as Finn practically fled the room, leaving her to manage Dave's continuing delusions with Sarah's help. It took another 30 minutes to calm the patient down, but Eleanor's mind was only half on the task. The other half was replaying the look of raw panic that had crossed Finn's face at the mention of Kevin Morrison's name. She found him in the supply closet 20 minutes later, standing among boxes of medical supplies, like a man who'd forgotten how to breathe. Finn? He didn't turn around. Funny how the universe has a sense of humor. Put a construction worker in my care and he starts rambling about Kevin Morrison. What are the odds? You know what happened to Kevin, don't you? I know enough. Finn's voice was hollow. I know he left St. Helena 2 weeks after Melanie died. I know he never returned my calls. I know he filed a complaint and then withdrew it. But you don't know the rest. Finn finally turned to face her, and Eleanor saw something in his eyes that made her chest tighten. The look of a man who'd been carrying a weight too heavy for one person to bear. What rest, Eleanor? She took a breath, knowing she was about to change everything. Kevin Morrison didn't just leave St. Helena. He left medicine entirely. He's working as a veterinary technician in the Portland now. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. When Finn finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. How do you know that? Marco looked him up yesterday. Ruby asked him to. Of course she did. Finn's laugh was bitter. Ruby never could leave well enough alone. Finn, what happened in that operating room 3 years ago? The real story, not the sanitized version everyone tells. For a moment, Eleanor thought he might actually tell her. She could see the words forming behind his eyes, the truth he'd been carrying like poison in his bloodstream. But then his wall slammed back into place. The real story is that a good woman died because I couldn't leave well enough alone. Everything else is just details. Details matter. Not these details. Finn moved toward the door. I need to check on my patients. Running away won't change what happened. No. Finn paused in the doorway. But it might prevent it from happening again. Meanwhile, in the hospital cafeteria, Sarah Blaine found herself in the unlikely position of sharing a table with Henry Wright during the lunch rush. It had started when she'd seen him sitting alone, methodically eating a sandwich while scribbling in a small notebook, completely oblivious to the chaos around him. Writing more philosophy? She asked, settling across from him with her usual tray of whatever Ruby had declared good for you that day. Henry looked up, his weathered face brightening with surprise. Sarah, actually, I'm working on my dissertation. Chapter 12. The Dignity of Humble Labor in Post-Industrial Society. Catchy title, really rolls off the tongue. You're mocking me, Henry observed mildly, but not unkindly. There's a difference. Sarah studied him over her coffee cup. You know, I never did understand why someone with a master's degree in engineering and 15 years at Microsoft decided to become a janitor. Same reason you left a life of rock concerts and backstage passes to become a nurse, I imagine. Touché. Sarah's smile was rueful, though in my case it was less philosophical awakening and more wake up at 35 and realize you've been living someone else's life. The examined life is worth living, Henry quoted, but examining it can be profoundly uncomfortable. You know what's funny? Sarah leaned back in her chair. Back in the day, I knew everyone. Rock stars, producers, industry executives. I was Sarah Blaine. The girl who could get you into any party, any venue, any after party you wanted. I was somebody. And now? Now I'm nobody special. Just another nurse in scrubs. And it's the most real I've ever felt. Henry nodded slowly. Success is a kind of performance. You become so good at playing the role that you forget who you were before you put on the costume. Exactly. Sarah's voice grew thoughtful. All those years, I thought I was living the dream. Turns out I was just sleepwalking through someone else's nightmare. Fame is shadow cast by the light of others' need. Substance lives in dark. That's beautiful, Sarah said and meant it. You should put that in your dissertation. Perhaps I will. Henry closed his notebook. Tell me, what made you choose nursing? Honestly, I was volunteering at a free clinic, trying to get my community service hours after a legal incident involving a hotel room and a keyboard player from a band I won't name. There was this kid, maybe 16, came in with a broken wrist and no insurance. The nurse on duty, Mrs. Patterson, sweetest woman you ever met, she didn't just treat his injury. She saw that he was scared, hungry, probably homeless. She got him connected with social services, made sure he had somewhere to sleep that night. Sarah paused, remembering, I watched her turn what could have been a 5-minute medical transaction into something that changed that kid's life. And I thought, that's real power. That's what it means to matter. So you traded influence for impact. Something like that. Sarah glanced around the cafeteria, her gaze landing on Ruby, who was having what appeared to be a dramatic argument with a soup pot. What about you? What made you give up the corporate world? Henry's expression grew distant. I spent 15 years optimizing systems, maximizing efficiency, increasing productivity. I was very good at it. But one day I realized I was essentially a highly paid problem solver for problems that shouldn't exist, creating solutions that made life more complicated for people I would never meet. Corporate disillusionment, it's an epidemic. It was more than that. Henry's voice grew quiet. My wife, my ex-wife now, she used to say I was disappearing, that I'd become so focused on systems and processes that I'd forgotten how to be human. She wasn't wrong. Is that when you left? That's when she left. Took our daughter, moved back to her mother's in Oregon. Said she couldn't compete with Microsoft for my attention anymore. Henry's smile was sad but not bitter. That was my wake-up call. I realized I'd been optimizing my life right out of existence. Sarah felt an unexpected kinship with this quiet man. So, you became a janitor. I became present. The janitorial work is just how I pay for the privilege. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two former stars who traded the spotlight for something more sustainable. You know what's weird? Sarah said finally. I don't miss it. The music, the parties, the chaos. I thought I would, but I don't. Because it was never really yours to begin with, Henry said gently. You were borrowing it from people who needed you to validate their success. Now you have something that belongs entirely to you. A nursing degree and a mortgage. Purpose, Henry corrected. The rarest luxury of all. Dr. Wellington found Finn in his office an hour later, staring at a computer screen filled with Kevin Morrison's medical file from 3 years ago. Jamie knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. A privilege of age and friendship. Brooding again, I see. Very dramatic. Very gothic hero. Jamie settled into the chair across from Finn's desk. Though I have to say, the whole tortured doctor look is getting a bit repetitive. Jamie, not today. Especially today. Wellington's tone grew serious. I just spoke with Elena. She says you know about Kevin Morrison. Finn's fingers stilled on the keyboard. You knew? Of course I knew. I've known since he left. I also know what really happened in that OR and why you've been carrying guilt that belongs to more than one person. Then you know why I can't just get over it like everyone seems to think I should. Wellington leaned forward, his weathered face earnest. What I know is that you've been punishing yourself for 3 years for a mistake that 2 doctors made under impossible circumstances. What I also know is that guilt is a luxury you can't afford if you want to keep saving lives. And what if I don't want to keep saving lives? What if I think the world might be safer if I found a different profession? Then you'd be an idiot, Wellington said bluntly. And I'd have to find a new chief of trauma surgery, which is a massive pain in the ass at my age. Despite everything, Finn almost smiled. Very compassionate bedside manner, Jamie. I save compassion for people who deserve it. You deserve honesty. Wellington stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. You want to know what I wrote in my journal today? Not particularly. A 70-year-old man claimed his erectile dysfunction was caused by electromagnetic interference from his neighbor's Wi-Fi. Creativity, 8 out of 10. Plausibility, negative infinity. Jamie. The point is, people lie to themselves and others every day. About their health, their choices, their motivations. But you, Finn, you've been telling yourself the most destructive lie of all. Which is that you're responsible for other people's choices. Wellington turned back to face him. Kevin Morrison chose to follow your advice instead of trusting his own instincts. That was his choice, not your responsibility. You chose to try to save the woman you loved instead of stepping back and letting someone else handle it. That was your choice, and it came from love, not arrogance. The result was the same. The result was a tragedy. But tragedy and fault aren't the same thing. Before Finn could respond, his pager buzzed urgently. Emma was waking up. Emma Wallace, not Morrison, as Finn's guilt-ridden brain had tried to make her, opened her eyes at 3:47 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. Her first word was, "Mom," her second was water, and her third was, "Why does everything hurt?" All of which were excellent signs. Finn stood at the foot of her bed, watching as Dr. Wellington conducted the neurological assessment with gentle efficiency. Eleanor was there too, observing both the patient and Finn with equal attention. "Can you tell me your name?" Wellington asked. "Emma Wallace. I'm 24. I live in Portland, and I was riding my motorcycle to work when..." Her voice trailed off, confusion clouding her features. "I don't remember what happened next." "You had an accident," Wellington explained gently. "You've been unconscious for about 30 hours. But your recovery is going very well." Emma's gaze shifted around the room, taking in the medical equipment, the concerned faces, the reality of her situation. "How bad was it?" "Bad enough," Finn said, speaking for the first time. "But you're going to be fine." There was something in his voice, relief maybe or absolution, that made Eleanor look at him sharply. Emma was going to recover completely. She would go home, return to her life, probably get back on a motorcycle despite everyone's advice to the contrary. She was not Melanie. Her story would have a different ending. "Doctor?" Emma's voice was small, younger than her 24 years. Will I be normal again?" "Define normal," Eleanor said with a slight smile. "But yes, all your cognitive functions appear intact. You'll need physical therapy for the other injuries, but your brain is fine." Emma closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners. "I was so scared I'd wake up. Different. That I wouldn't be me anymore." Finn felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of tension he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. Emma was scared, but she was alive. She was herself. She had a future. Unlike Melanie, who would never have any of those things. But maybe that wasn't his fault. Maybe Wellington was right, and tragedy wasn't the same as failure. "Dr. Ashwood," Emma's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Thank you for saving my life." Finn nodded, not trusting his voice. In the hallway, he could see Ruby through the window, dabbing at her eyes with a dish towel and muttering what appeared to be prayers of gratitude. Marco was probably somewhere running diagnostics on medical equipment to make sure nothing else would malfunction. Henry was likely composing a haiku about second chances. This was what healing looked like: messy, complicated, requiring the efforts of many people who cared enough to show up. "We'll leave you to rest," Wellington said, ushering them toward the door. "Your parents are flying in from Portland. They'll be here tomorrow morning." As they stepped into the hallway, Finn felt Eleanor's hand briefly touch his arm. "You okay?" "I will be," he said, and for the first time in 3 years, he thought he might actually mean it. But the universe, as Finn had learned repeatedly, had a twisted sense of timing. His phone rang as they were walking away from Emma's room. The caller ID made his blood run cold. Portland General Hospital. Dr. Ashwood, this is Dr. Jennifer Kim from Portland General. I'm calling about a patient who specifically asked for you. Kevin Morrison. He's asking to speak with you before his surgery tomorrow. Finn stopped walking. Eleanor and Wellington, sensing something, stopped too. Surgery? Finn's voice sounded distant to his own ears. Brain tumor, glioblastoma, stage 4. I'm sorry, Dr. Ashwood. Mr. Morrison said you two used to work together. He's insisting that he needs to talk to you before we operate. He says... Dr. Kim paused. He says he has something he needs to tell you about a Dr. Melanie Mitchell. The hallway around Finn seemed to tilt. Reality shifting like water. Eleanor was saying something, but he couldn't hear her over the roaring in his ears. Kevin Morrison was dying. Kevin Morrison wanted to see him. Kevin Morrison had something to say about Melanie. Dr. Ashwood, are you there? Finn forced himself to speak. I'll be there tonight. He hung up and turned to find Eleanor and Wellington staring at him with expressions of deep concern. The past, Finn said quietly, apparently isn't finished with me yet.